Climate change, pandemic, and now war. A perfect disaster for the whole world. Millions across the globe await their daily bread, but it is stuck in the ports of Ukraine or destroyed by unexpected rains and drought, or was never sold due to pandemic. Since 2014, global hunger has been rising. Last 2 years were the worst, with a series of bad harvests and COVID cutting into the food supply chain. Global supply of wheat, one of the world's most important carbohydrates, has fallen after many years. People without regular access to food have more than doubled. Some 80 crores of people go to bed hungry every night. And this year is already looking terrible. The Ukraine war is escalating the crisis. Not just hunger, but it has already shaken some governments. People in many places are in the streets and their patience running out. The story unfolding can be the biggest of our times. While we go deep into it, please subscribe to our channel. Welcome to the Money Trail. Remember Tunisia, the only democracy that emerged from the Arab Spring? Well, it's collapsing into tyranny with the president amassing more power. Tunisia usually imports about 42% of its wheat from Ukraine and relies on it for sunflower oil, another crucial commodity. With those imports gone, the country is struggling to find other suppliers it can afford. As food disappears from the shelves, hunger is turning into anger, while the government doesn't trust its citizens anymore. Around 25 million tons of corn and wheat is trapped inside Ukraine, equivalent to the annual consumption of the world's least developed economies. The Black Sea region, which includes Russia, Ukraine and Kazakhstan, is one of the world's 6 food baskets. Russia is the largest wheat exporter, while Ukraine is the 6th on the list. Together, the two warring countries produce 12% of all food calories traded globally, control 29% of global wheat exports, 19% of maize exports, and 78% of sunflower oil exports. And with that breadbasket off the market, prices rocketed. Is this the first ever global food crisis, at least in recent times? No. In the recent past, there were 2. One in 2008 and another in 2011, with lot of chaos and tragedies. But this is the worst in severity and spread. Some 50 countries depend on Russia and Ukraine for their food supply. The majority of these are poor countries in Asia and Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa is the worst hit. Households there already spend up to 40% of their income feeding themselves. A further rise in prices means millions won't be able to afford food. Huge unrest across the globe is predicted to happen soon. It may even topple some regimes. Remember, in 2008 food crisis, we saw riots in more than 40 countries. And in 2011, there were riots and also the beginning of the Arab Spring. Diplomatic firefighting was going on for some time to open up the Ukraine ports, a seesaw game where hopes die out fast. The peace deal brokered by Turkey, immediately bursted by a missile attack on the Odessa port, was the latest.
Just a day after the landmark agreement signed by Russia and Ukraine, Kyiv's officials say Russian missiles have struck the key port of Odessa.
But as we speak, one ship loaded with corn has finally left the Odessa port. 16 more are ready at the docks. World is watching with fingers crossed, hoping for its safe passage through the Black Sea. Will it ease the prices? Will it end the chaos? Already prices have fallen. In the future market, wheat prices come down to $8 per bushel from 12.5 in 3 months. But that may not make the food affordable to those waiting in lines all over the world. There are a lot of other costs which may still rise.
There are ancillary costs which makes the trading of these commodities really pricey. Now, when I talk about the ancillary cost, the US dollars getting stronger will have an impact on those countries which are importing the commodities because the commodities are still priced in dollars. The other thing is on the insurance. So insurance is a pretty important component of the commodities trading. When you're moving commodities, you will have to insure the physical cargoes. Now, with all this pressure which the world is seeing from Black Sea and all that, the cost of insurance underwriters are a little bit skeptical in terms of writing the risk of vessels which are passing through these war zones and all that. So the price of insurance is already going high. So that'll have an impact, ancillary cost. The other thing is freight. because of the underinvestment in the fossil fuel industry, we have seen that the pricing of oil is really going high. It is not only because of demand, but it's also because of the constrained supplies in the world. And that will have an impact on the overall shipping cost. And we know that shipping is a very important component of commodities movement and trading as well. So that'll go up.
The whole world is paying the price for the Russia versus US bout. To make things worse, 23 countries now have severe restrictions on food exports, including India. India, after promising to help the needy countries, backtracked following severe heat waves that affected wheat production. Another threat is also looming large. Farms run on fuel and fertilizer. Prices of both have risen. And if they are forced to cut back on fertilizer, the yields will fall even more at the worst possible time. We are looking at less food production next year. Imagine what that would do to the food prices. It's a vicious cycle with catastrophic consequences. Nowhere on earth will be immune. This is the story so far. But where did all this begin? From the day war broke out, or when the pandemic happened? The stories peddled by the verse may say so. But it started long back, when the poor and the developing countries were forced to open their borders for free trade. Today, 1 out of every 5 calories people eat has crossed at least one international border. Such is the interconnect of the world food market. It's highly unequal also. The poor countries are net importers and the high-income countries net exporters. When the international agreements opened the national borders for trade, only financially viable commodities could survive. Thus, the global south became the source of only those food commodities that cannot be produced in the developed world, while all the staple food commodities came from the north, the developed nations. Producers in the south cannot match their price because it's a large-scale, highly mechanized and technology-oriented production. Take the case of India. India is now heavily dependent on imports of pulses and edible oils. In fact, it's the biggest importer. 3 decades back, this was not the case. Trade liberalization and lack of public procurement made the farmers withdraw from cultivating pulses and oilseed crops. For smaller countries, this is even worse.
There was a time when India was self-sufficient in both pulses and oilseeds, and now we are extremely import dependent for both these crops. And this is something that has happened across the world with trade liberalization.
Today, just 6 food baskets supply the major chunk of world's staple food. Anything that happens in any of these regions can affect many millions elsewhere.
State has withdrawn from so many areas, including agriculture, because of which the only thing that has remained is the MSP. So I'm not saying MSP is bad, but I'm saying that's the only thing that has remained, and the farm, that is what always gets negotiated, and the other things are not talked about at all. And now you have, when there was a bit of a pressure, then they started the income transfer, the 6,000 rupees income transfer to farmers. But the issue of investment in infrastructure for agriculture is something that didn't come up. That's not that doesn't give immediate political dividends, obviously, because you're not giving it directly. I mean, the beneficiary is not identified as one single farmer, possibly. But we don't have a long-term. What is our agriculture policy?
The fertilizer shortage and its high price also didn't start with the Ukraine war. Since 2020, the European Union and the US have progressively imposed restrictive measures against Belarus, the largest potash producer in the world. In fact, specific sanctions were imposed against their 2 biggest potash exporters. The US sanctions on Iran, a major diammonium phosphate supplier, also contributed to reduce fertilizer availability. Its international price last March was 81% higher compared to the same time in 2021. Global potash prices were about 3 times and urea prices were about double the prices in March last year. India's reliance on imports of fertilizers have steadily increased. In 2020, India met about 30% of urea and 61% of ammonium phosphate through imports. Even if the prices go up, higher input costs of agriculture means less profit for the farmers. They themselves may not be able to buy other food commodities which they don't produce. Price hikes toppling even the agriculture system in the developing world is what that can happen. Government may withdraw from food subsidies, unable to bear the huge import bill. Total chaos may follow.
And this may cause people getting into the streets, like what we have seen in 2010, 11, the Arab Spring kind of model, protest on the streets and these kind of things. It could have a bigger impact, especially the poor countries are facing in Middle East and Africa.
What's the solution? Making food imports affordable is one, but only a peripheral one. With less than 10 countries doing 90% import of wheat, corn, rice and soybean, the crisis may return anytime. It need not be a war or climate change next time. So what shall we do? Countries need to insulate themselves, become self-sufficient as much as possible, protect their farmers, and also strive for a just world order where profit is not the first priority. The West will forget this crisis as soon as their war with Russia is over, but we shall not. For the South, this is going to be a long, long battle.